everybody, welcome back to another episode of the WBL Update. My name is Allie Gwitt, and this is
Brett Wittchow. Happy to be here.
Happy to be here is right. So he's here from the Milwaukee Kings, who just came off defeating the Wisconsin Ignite in the championship game. So huge congratulations, repping the hat. Love to see it.
Appreciate it.
So going into this season, we're going to talk a little bit about what the transformation of the Kings was this season, right? So going from the beginning of the year to now where you are, how do you feel your team has evolved to become, the WBL champions? What did it take to get there? What were some key additions throughout the season to get to that point?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it starts with our core, and our core are the people that were there right from day one, and that was the guys that came to both tryouts. The guys that were offered a spot. Our core still starts with that, and I think those guys did a really nice job of keeping what we were doing consistent the entire year. Getting stops on defense was always a big point of emphasis, and those were the guys that were, really honing in on making that an emphasis for everybody else, even when we added guys. But then, obviously, we were able to add, I think our first addition was Ben Meinholz. He came in a little bit late, but he was still kind of right around when the WBL preseason tournament was. And he made a difference as soon as he stepped into practice. I mean, he wasn't practicing full go right away, but he was leading with his voice already. He was helping me from a coaching aspect, explaining some of my ideas to the guys and that sort of stuff. So he made an immediate impact. And then I think our next addition was actually Tyreek, and Tyreek was on a different team in the WBL, and with kind of the rules on how you can add and acquire players, he cleared it with his former coach, and then he cleared it with Allie, cleared it with me. We said I'd love to take him. He's a high-intensity, high-energy guy, so we brought him in. I think that made a huge difference. He usually came off the bench for us, but never had one complaint. He was constantly giving it his all when he'd come into the game. And I think that made a big difference for us too. Our next addition was pretty big. It was a former overseas player. Well, not former, he's still an overseas player. He had just gotten back from his season in Denmark, Adam Fravert. And he's a 6'8", shot-blocking, mobile, three-point shooting big. I think that's probably the most valuable type of player you can have.
Especially in this league with the lack of height, essentially, right? There's not many 6'8" guys that ended up closing the postseason. I don't think there's Sergio Nanu from Movement. Other than that, I think Adam was the clear tallest.
Yeah. And usually for our bigs in this league, they weren't quite used to guarding outside by the three-point line.
No.
And with him, you gotta get a hand, or he's gonna get it going, or you gotta at least disrupt his shot somehow, or he's going to hit that thing. So that was a big pickup. Defensively, I think he ended up averaging 3-4 blocks a game, something like that. So he was a big deal on the defensive side as well. And then our last addition, right before the second ad deadline, we added Trev Entwistle, who's a former D2 point guard from Minnesota Duluth. And he's been in the area. He comes to the open gyms that I run at Blaze, and he's in really good shape still. And he's the type of guy that doesn't need shots. He's not looking to score really.
Yeah.
The times that he scores is when the other guys on our team are like, Trev, shoot the ball. Go score.
Yeah.
You can go score on this guy.
I've heard that from your guys, is that Trevor is such a distributor and such a bulldog on the other end of the floor. Talk about defensively, how important was that to have?
So big. With our defensive concepts, a lot of what we were doing is we were trying to be really physical outside the three-point line with other teams' guards. We were trying to force them out of the middle, which meant, having to move your feet and be really physical with your hands, but still not get called for fouls. And I think he's probably one of the best guards in the league to be able to do that. Putting him and Tyreek on the floor defensively the entire fourth quarter in the championship game, that was probably what made the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, they basically shut down Cole and JB, two of the top scorers in the league, or sometimes they had a crack at Dakota too, but for the most part they were taking Cole or JB, and in the fourth quarter they were locking up. And defensive stops is kind of what got us back into that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with those additions throughout the year and maintaining your core, I felt like that was the most, and I talked about this all season long, with your roster, there's just through and through, I feel like guys that know their roles, right?
Absolutely.
There's guys you put in, they're not expecting more than 2 minutes or whatever it may be, and they know their spot. They know what they got to work towards. They know who's above them, but it's not an envious thing. And I felt like all season long, that is exactly what propelled you to that spot. You know, you can have all these big hitters, but if they don't know their roles, you know, it changes the game for you guys tremendously. In that championship game, you talked about how you guys had to come back from a little bit of a deficit. You know, Ignite pretty much powered a majority of that game in the sense of the point lead. For me, I felt like I was telling you before, I watched on the sideline, I was like, I mean, you guys were the clear favorites in the sense of record. You look at your past, right? Ignite was struggling with numbers all year round. Still have a great talented core. I mean, they got to the semifinal game with 7 guys. I don't know how many other teams in the league could do that. But, you know, they're there, and, you know, your bench is through and through to here, and they got 7 guys on the floor, and, they're working what seems to be one of their better offensive games. How did you guys come back from that deficit? I mean, it was a few points that they just had the lead by, but it just felt like enough that you guys weren't kicking in until that final quarter.
And we talked about it before the game. I mean, Ignite has some guys that can score in bunches. I mean, they can just turn it on and they can go off, you know. And we're not necessarily a team like that. You know, we are good in transition, but at the same time, we only shoot around 20 threes a game. We only make under 5 threes a game, so we're not really the same type of team as them. Those guys are shooting a lot of threes. They're scoring in bunches. So one of my big emphasized points before the game to my guys is they're going to go on runs. They're going to score 10-0, 12-0, 14-0 run. It's going to happen. We've got to just keep our heads on straight and be able to start with a defensive stop and then go get a score and then get another defensive stop. And I think our guys finally in the third quarter, kind of towards the end of the third quarter, they started to actually hold each other accountable, which was good to see too. You know, we had guys coming into huddles, and it wasn't like it was hostile yelling, but it was getting after other guys like, hey, we got to make them do something else. You got to make them put the ball on the floor. They're getting to their catch and shoot too easily. I don't care if it's from 3-4 feet behind the 3-point line. Make them do something else. And I think when other guys were starting to get on other guys and it wasn't just coming from me, that's when things started to pick up defensively, and we were actually getting stop after stop, and that's when you started to kind of see the score change and go into our favor.
Yeah, and I mean, there was this run there where, I mean, you're exactly right. You can have Cole Elstead who's going to go from back-to-back to back-to-back, or you can have JB that's going to go from back-to-back to back-to-back, or you can have Dakota that'll do his thing all the game long. But there was a stretch where JB hit, I think, like 3 drastically distant, like
deep
threes,
nothing but net.
deep. Yeah, and it was just nasty. Like at that point, you know, when they're on one of those runs, I mean, it's very, very plausible that they can, you know, going into the championship game, even before the semifinal, what they were 7-6, you guys were 11-2, right? Statistically, they have more numbers, right? So you have more numbers statistically, right? You have a little bit more of a versatile group of guys, but it when they get on those runs, it doesn't. It washes a lot of that away, I feel.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's a matter of how long that run can go for, and then, you know, defensively, if they're guys, I mean, they have to be perfect every possession with that limited number of groups. So
absolutely, it
was good to see. You know, ultimately the comeback and everything happened. I want to talk a little bit about Mac Jones, because I think he is like so. I mean, and underrated by my standpoint too, because going into this season. Right. What a lot of people don't know is that going into this season, before we even had Kings, it was a big ordeal, right, beforehand. But before we had the official Kings, it was like they didn't even have a coach. Yeah. Right? You weren't involved at that point yet. And so, you know, here I am going down to the tryouts in Milwaukee, trying to nearly not cover it up in a sense that they don't have one, but they had a coach that was going to be there, and then it just ultimately didn't work out that way. So, Mac was one of those guys that, you know, from the looks of it, he doesn't have much muscle on him. You think in which is, you know, no offense to Mac, you know, like, right, but you think in a league like this, you have to be physically ready to go, you know, and definitely by the looks of it, you could definitely put him in a category where you're like, I just don't think this guy could compete. I don't know how this guy could score. But, you know, after that second tryout, I mean, he had to be one of the best in the gym, and it was a clear, like, to my standing that, like, he needed to be on the roster. But he definitely excelled beyond what I thought. Talk a little bit about how important Mac has come up for you guys specifically.
Yeah, so Mac is incredible. He's one of those core guys, obviously, that you were saying that was there right away. He's been at every practice, every game. This is a guy that, he had a JUCO team lined up this year that didn't end up having a season because of COVID. He had a legitimate high school career at Muskego. This guy, sometimes you see him and you think, nah, he's not much of a player, but this guy's a hooper. There's a difference between a basketball player and a hooper. Mac is a hooper, man. He steps on the court, and that guy is a bucket. We'll run sets for him, and he'll go get a basket, and then we'll instantly run another set for him. He'll get another basket, and he'll turn to the defense and say, none of you can guard me. And that's what I love about him.
Yeah,
He'll let people know, and it's great. It's great energy. Defensively, this guy he's not quick, but he's long, and he gets his hands on all sorts of
every
steals.
One of those, right? That one cross, it's one tip.
He just decides sometimes that he's going to pick you. So he just gets up into you, and then as soon as you try to make your move, he sticks his long arm out, and he just takes the ball, and he goes. I don't know if he missed one of those all year. And then shot blocking, too. Like, this guy he blocks shots without fouling dudes, and I don't know how it happens. He gets them from behind. He gets them from the side. Like, he made some incredible defensive plays the entire year that a lot of times that's what was sparking our runs. Like, he's getting steals. He's getting big blocks, and we're getting energized from it. We're running the floor. And this guy's, his floater game, his finishing game, his scoop game, it's nuts.
And the way he can really use his body in a versatile way, right? Like where it can absorb that contact but still have a nice soft finish is truly impressive, and that's one of the things that I noticed all year long. A lot of people gravitate towards Mac, but I think that one thing I noticed all year long was that Mac was just such a key contributor in getting you those buckets when you needed them most, right? Like where it was like, wow, they could really use it. And that's exactly what happened in the championship game.
Exactly.
You needed a bucket, Mac got you one. And he was your second, I believe, your second leading scorer behind. It wasn't, Favorite had 14.
Favorite didn't have a great game.
Mac had 18 or 15, I believe, and ultimately was your second leading scorer behind the Finals MVP of Ben Meinholz with 38. So it was a very I think Trev didn't have much, Tyreek didn't have much, so it was very much secluded to those two guys. And so it was impressive to see him step up in those moments when you guys needed it most.
For sure. And Max got one of the best attitudes outside of, just being on the basketball court too. Like a great teammate, great dude in the locker room, gets along with everybody. He's always hyping guys up. So we had a lot of guys like that. Eric Jones too, he's not related in any way to Mac, but he was a similar kind of guy. He came to every single practice. He's younger. He's got a shot to play at a JUCO still. And I think he is a guy that he's going to keep growing in his basketball game too. And even though he didn't see a ton of minutes for us, he learned every single time he was on the floor, and he got better every single time, and he brought valuable minutes all throughout the season for us.
Yeah, I don't think there was a point in the season where I saw him hurt you in a sense, hurt you, right? It didn't mean he was going to be your biggest hitter out there, but he's definitely a guy that I felt like all season long had given you those contributing defensive stops that just pushed you in the right momentum way. And
super tough defender.
He was just a guy that didn't do too much either offensively. I felt like he knew his role, knew his place.
He's efficient. You look at our shooting percentages as a team this year, and everybody's up in the mid 40s. We were taking good shots for the most part as a team. I think early in the season, when we were playing at the Herd Arena, sometimes our offense got sped up and we were taking quick ones and not as good ones, and that's when our games were a little bit closer and we were struggling. But when we moved over to the Dells and kind of those last few games in Oshkosh, our guys started to trust one another and realize that when they gave it up, there was an opportunity for them to cut or move and get the ball back still.
Yes,
and get an even better shot, You
definitely did juice the 24 seconds out of those, I felt like.
For sure.
In transition, different story, right? Everyone's a different story.
In transition.
But that's everybody, right? And when it comes down to it, though, I felt like you guys utilized your 24 seconds in the best way possible. And you had some guys that got dirty, got the boards again. Adam was always looking to get up and tip one back out. And
absolutely.
So I think your possessions were a little bit longer, just a little bit harder, and that made the defense work a little bit harder too in those final games. So, talk a little bit about just kind of going through your roster. I think about Marcel Kemp and how he fits within it.
Yeah, I mean, Marcel is such a good dude. He was a guy that before we brought in any additions, he was probably going to be our 20-point-a-game guy.
Yeah.
He was going to be, the ball was going to be in his hand. He was going to have to take a load for the scoring. And as we started to grow as a team and add guys, it wasn't like he was really angry about losing that role.
No.
It wasn't like he was being mean to the other guys that were starting to take some of those shots that he was getting before, He was a great teammate through the entire thing. I remember points in time where he was sitting on the bench next to me, and he was looking at the lineup that we had in the game and how we were playing, and he's like, Coach, we got a squad, man.
We're tough.
We're tough. This is tough.
Yeah.
And he was right, Those our guys on the floor were killing it. So he had a great attitude throughout the entire thing, and even with his kind of taking a step down in his role for scoring, I mean, that guy still brought it leadership-wise. He was talking. Defensively, he was one of our best help defenders, right? Like, we have some really good on-ball defenders, but it's a whole nother thing to be a good help defender, weak side defender. He was one of the best weak side defenders in the league. I think he got so many weak side post-entry steals or tips.
Yeah,
that
he
kind of
always
stuff.
coming from behind and tipping. Yep.
He's one of the most athletic guards I've ever played against myself or watched play. I mean, some of the plays that this guy makes, just in terms of finishing and ball handling and stuff, like, he's an incredible talent, and I think he's going to have a really nice career in this WBL league. I can see him coming back and just getting better and better and growing.
Completely agree. I mean, and when you look at it, I don't think you can ask, going through your stats here, I don't think you can ask for a more even split. I mean, you have 4 guys that average double digits throughout the season, with Ben Meinholz leading with 21, then Adam with 19 average. Marcel took a little bit of a step down with 13, but that's still
good. It's consistent.
Exactly, and that's the thing is, when you point that out about Marcel, I completely agree. I mean, if you would have asked me who your biggest hitters in the beginning of the year were, I mean, Marcel was definitely a top one.
That was it. Yeah, I mean, in our WBL tournament, the preseason tournament, he had to score. He must have scored over 50% of our points.
Yeah, he was tournament MVP.
Yeah,
and to go through that whole progression and not disrupt the team's chemistry or flow,
Never once. That guy never caused an issue in practice. I mean, he was constantly good attitude. I mean, those things are what people don't see, but that's what makes a championship team for sure.
Exactly.
It's the guys like that he had that first team all league role at the beginning of the year. Like, he was set to take that role, and our team probably wouldn't have been as good, but then he takes a step back, we add more guys, and all of a sudden, that's what made us a championship level team.
Exactly. And you also have Trev, who averaged 10.5, Mac, who averaged 10.4, Vaughn, who averaged 8.6, so it's crazy to see that how much of a contributing factors you have from each squad. Tyreek 9.1. I mean, that's a pretty good roster all around. And like you said, you didn't get a chance where you always saw them all together, but towards the end, I mean, Marcel, Ben, Adam, Mac, Vaughn, all these guys are playing together.
It was our full line. Yeah, we had our full squad there that last game. I mean, everybody was pretty much getting the same spurts, the same runs in quarters 1 through 3. In the fourth quarter, we stuck with kind of the lineup that I wanted out there, just from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah.
But from 1 through 3, and this is the case with a lot of guys, with a lot of our games, those guys were coming in and they were playing hard, and they were taking good shots and not forcing anything. And I think the entire year we were we had the least turnovers out of any team. I'd look at our stats and I'd see games where we had under 10 turnovers. For a professional team like this to have under 10 turnovers in a full-length FIBA game, that says a lot, and it says a lot to those guys, like Marcel and Tyreek and the guys that are coming in for those short spurts. They're not forcing things.
Yeah.
They're not coming in and trying to do too much because they know they're not going to be in there for so long.
Yep.
They're coming in and making the right play still, which was a big deal.
Yeah, they're distributing the balls in the right way or to the right guy, and that right guy is going to find the even better guy, right? You guys are like the kings of one more passing, literally.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I definitely can get behind that. Talk a little bit about, so Ben Meinholtz and Adam Fravor, both guys that you played with or against. Adding them on and them kind of knowing who you are as a coach, and then translating that, like you said, when Ben came on, it was just a big contributor in helping.
For sure.
How was it? I mean, those were two guys that there were only 2 of 4 guys that averaged a double-double in the WBL. So
Sure.
Jaquan McGraw from the Wisconsin Ignite and Isaiah Banks from the Fury were the only, out of everyone in the league, those are the only 4 guys to average a double-double all season long. So what was it like to be able to get them going? Because it had to be a bit of an adjustment for probably specifically more so Adam, the fact that, right, but you've always been a bit older in that sense. So was that a good relationship? Was it an awkward relationship at first?
No, I mean, I'll start with Adam. I mean, like a lot of the vocab and terms and stuff that we were doing kind of roots from my background at Oshkosh playing with Adam. So when he stepped in, a lot of the stuff like the ball screen actions we were doing and the spacing we wanted out of the ball screens, our transition, that was pretty much exactly what we had done together for 4 years. So that was pretty easy for him to just jump in. We added more professional style sets versus like the college style sets, but he had already been doing that for a season in Denmark, so he had that experience too. And when he stepped in, I really think that he didn't even miss a beat. Maybe that first half of the first game he played against Ignite at the Herd Arena, he was a little bit off, but then all of a sudden second half, like things were clicking. He was picking things up. He was making plays with other guys, and it was good to see. And Adam and I, it's always been, nothing but respect and love. We've had a lot of battles over the years and practices and stuff, but he respects me as a player and coach. I respect him extremely as a player. I mean, he's one of the best. He's one of the best players I've ever played with. You know, he's crazy. Ben, moving on to Ben, I played against him for 4 years in college, but in the WEAC, in the Division III conference in Wisconsin, the teams do similar things. Like everybody steals plays, everybody steals ideas from other teams. Whatever's working.
It's a tight-knit conference.
It's kind of what everybody starts doing. So Ben is almost the same thing. Like he had a good idea of what we were doing from day one, and he's a guy that was really good at communicating what I was trying to say and what I was trying to get guys to do with the guys. So he was just a really good relay for that. A lot of times, if it's just me coaching and we've got 2 sides of the court going, it's hard for me to see and focus on both sides of the court. So I'd have him on one end doing the drills, doing whatever we're doing, me on the other end. He's able to focus on stuff down there. I mean, he's basically another coach, which was nice. It was super nice.
But you need those guys, right? All rosters, all ages, all groups, right? They need that player that's going to step up and help fill the holes in the sense where, you are outnumbered in an extreme amount. So to have a guy that people respect like Ben to step up in that position is influential for your team.
And Ben is a guy that right now he's really making an attempt to go overseas. So he's been working out with trainers and been doing runs back home every single day. You can tell
though. But Ben, in the beginning of the year, and I don't know if it was the injury or just getting back into shape.
He just came off an injury, and he hadn't really started that training schedule yet.
Yeah, and he was just locked in, like a whole different beast from like every single game. It was a step up, a step up, a step up, and I think that was huge for him.
And I think the guy has gotten taller for one and more athletic since college. Like he's throwing down a big 2-hand dunk almost every single game.
I would have never anticipated that he could, do that.
In college, he was dunking, but I remember on film, they were more rim grazing dunks.
Yeah.
That's probably more what he was doing. Now it's like 2-hand power, people around him. Like he's athletic and he's a really high IQ guy. He can score from 3 levels. He's got a good post game. He's got a good mid-range game. He's got a 3-point shot. So I think he's definitely a guy that'll get a chance to go overseas, similar to a league that Favorite was playing in, stuff like that. So I'm excited for the future of the Milwaukee Kings team, just because we have so many guys that are not just going to be done playing basketball right now and they're just going to like take this time off and then they're going to try to pick it up again. Like we have real hoopers that are going to be putting in work every single day to try to go play overseas and then try to come back and play here.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about what you've done as a coach or what you've helped players through, being in the position of someone that has gone overseas and wants to go back overseas, correct? what you know what it takes to get there. If guys on your roster that know what it takes or know what it takes to be a part of that process, what have you done as a coach to help influence those guys and motivate those guys to get on over there?
Sure. I think what a lot of people underestimate is the work it takes outside of just the basketball court work too. When you're trying to get signed by a team, there are hundreds and thousands probably of teams around the world that are willing to bring in basketball players from anywhere in the world, and they're willing to pay, and they're willing to cover your food, and they're willing to help you travel and these cool experiences. But what guys don't understand is usually it doesn't matter how good of a basketball player you are on the floor, you're going to have to do some work outside the floor too. You're going to have to actually get on your computer and start emailing teams and sending people your resumes and highlight videos and stuff. So I think a lot of what I helped out with my guys this year is trying to get them to have a good resume that looks professional and that a overseas professional coach would look at and actually be impressed enough to go and watch the highlight video, because that's usually the order. Usually kind of go resume, okay, this looks pretty good, let me go to the highlight video, and then that's how that everything starts. So I showed them my resume that I've made in the past. I've got a few different styles, formats. I've showed them those. I've kind of helped them with taking our huddle film, turning it into highlights, turning it into YouTube links, so it's just a little bit easier to send to coaches. But then the rest is on our guys, and I talked to them about it too. I mean, the people that are getting signed overseas, a lot of times they're the ones that are sending out 100 emails a day, 100 Facebook messages a day. They're constantly staying on the grind, trying to find a team that needs a spot or that needs the player that they are. So I think that's just as big of a part as staying ready on the court too. And I think that our guys are started to realize that too. I know I have a few of them that started to make highlight videos and resumes. So.
Well, that's good. I mean, where do you see, league's currently in talks of moving it to the summer season to work better around and accommodate for overseas players. Do you think that's a positive thing? Are you on board with it? And do you see the league growing into a more of an overseas outlet for guys? Or do you there's still some guys that the league caters to where they have no interest in overseas. They can still hoop.
Absolutely.
They have no interest in overseas.
Absolutely.
They could, but they just don't. They don't have it. They don't want to leave. They have a family, whatever it may be. So what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. I think I am on board for one with moving the league back a little bit so that it can fit an overseas. If a player wants to play overseas, they do their 6, 7, 8 month season there, and then immediately afterwards they can pretty much pick up the ball and start playing again here with this league. I think that's, if me as a player, if I were to do that this next season, that would ideally be the setup. And I think for the other overseas guys too, like that would probably be the preferred setup. For the guys that are good enough to play overseas, but really, their life is here, they just want to hoop in the WBL. I think that the pushing the season back for them is a good idea too, just in terms of when we get to like the summer months. I think it's a better time for basketball and people to come to games, and it's almost like the time of the year where kids are doing AAU, but like we're at that older level, we're in our 20s, low 30s, stuff like that. Like this is kind of our not AAU, but it's almost the same thing. I think we can get a lot of people to agree to play to that later season. Yeah,
and when thinking about, obviously the league is not in the position to pay the players right now, but we're working towards to be big enough to be able to adjust to something like that, maybe down the road, right? Like let's just put that totally out of the picture once, and let's talk a little bit about what do players get out of this league? Like if the WBL isn't here and you come back from overseas, what are your options compared to if the WBL is here? Like how important is the WBL, do you feel, in your eyes?
Well, for one, for anybody that's trying to get, updated highlights, updated resume stats, it's super important for that. Coaches want to see an updated version of you.
And FIBA rules too.
Exactly, and FIBA rules too. So that itself is super important. Just the fact that, some of these teams were practicing 2 times a week before the games were starting, otherwise 1 time a week. Like that's really good for these guys. I've got guys on my team that were set to have college seasons this year. They were set to be practicing almost every single day and having multiple games a week and stuff like that. So I think having an actual league where you have practices too, that's a benefit. That's going to get more young guys interested and involved versus other leagues where, you know, you're just going to play. You're not really getting a practice in. You're just going to hoop when you get there. That can get frustrating. And when you get to a game and you guys aren't on the same page and you haven't built chemistry and stuff, like, that's frustrating for me as a player. I'd like to have a practice or two to get everybody on the same page. So I think that's a big benefit for players playing in this league. Plus, in this league, you like making connections is such a big part of growing your basketball career. And in this league, there's so many opportunities to make connections. You know, you've got tons of talented players. You've got really experienced and good backgrounds from the coaches. We've got an organization in Blaze behind it that is willing to help basically anybody, you know, if they came and asked for help. So I think that the league, the people that are in the league, just the community surrounding the league, that's reason enough for guys to come back and play in the coming years too.
Yeah, and you know, that was one of the biggest things that we wanted to, I was talking with Tommy McGlynn about, you know, moving it to summer, what that really offers instead of your other options, right? You're kind of stuck in like summer leagues or like Y-ball, rec morning leagues where it's like those guys have nothing to lose while you're trying to find an overseas contract. And it's like, it's not regulated, you know, and as tough as some of the calls, you know, maybe this year, like at least we have 3 refs out on the floor. You're getting some structure. You're getting an understanding of what it would be like in the summertime to kind of continue your career overseas. So I think that for me, that was like one of the biggest things that I was like, okay, I'm a little bit more on board with that in that sense. Absolutely. It makes sense, and from that standpoint, to put people in better positions, you know. I guess kind of one of the last questions I have for you is, where do you see the Kings roster in year 2? Do you see looking to add some additions? Do you like what's kind of your outlook as a coach?
Sure.
For the Kings roster.
So I think for my core guys, the guys that were pretty much at every single game, you know, they're all obviously going to be offered a spot to come back. I think we've got probably 10 or 11 that are, you know, for sure, you know, those guys are going to get spots, or they're going to be offered spots back on the roster next year. So that means, you know, with the league rules having, I believe, 20 on your roster and 15 active, or 20 active.
Yep, so you can have up to 20 guys on your roster with 15 active. 15 active. I mean, and that you could have all 20 show up and decide who the 15 are active right that day, but essentially, so that's your guideline.
So, you know, we have room to add a few guys, and I think even with how good our roster is now, you know, iron sharpens iron, and if we can get a few more, you know, really good players, we're going to be an even better team next year, and we're going to be able to challenge guys even more in practices. We're going to be a little bit more deep, I think, and we'll see what guys, you know, what their plans are for their future next year and stuff. You know, things happen, and some guys can't play that maybe we're able to play this year, so you know, roster might look a little bit different, but I'm hoping to get, you know, most of our core back. And if we can build around that again, you know, we're going to be in good shape.
Absolutely. Well, few things. Milwaukee Kings 12-2, league leaders, right? WBL champions, coach of the year, finals MVP, Adam Fravor, first team all league. Think we can see that again in year 2?
Absolutely.
I like it.
We may even claim that regular season MVP this year.
Oh, yeah. I know. There's a lot of talk about that. Some things will change moving forward, and we're looking to add some more awards as well. So a lot of great things to come from year 2, not only from the Kings, but the WBL.
Absolutely.
So, Brett, thank you for your time, and congratulations on a great season.
Thank you, Allie. It was fun.